You know, the best science fiction is a mirror. It allows us to take a look at ourselves and our current circumstances, politics, society, but putting it into a science fiction context. You know, I grew up in the early 1970s when we were still going to the moon, and I caught the tail end of the Apollo program. Seeing that Saturn V rocket on the pad, with all the vapors coming off of it, it was almost like a religious experience, man, watching that as a child. Then eventually, you know, seeing it take off, and then the astronauts 3 days later arriving at the moon, and then landing this super cool lunar module, and then driving around a rover and bouncing around. It's almost sad to me that kids these days don't have something like that. I don't think people can even relate to what that was like back then, how inspirational it was. I would go check out all the books on NASA, and I would look at not only the missions that were currently happening, but also their projected missions into the future. And so they would talk about plans for the 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. And I would see things like moon bases and space stations and visits to Mars and so forth. And it was like, I'm gonna grow up and I'm gonna be part of that. But then for some reason, once we stopped going to the moon, I noticed interest waning. I watched my friends lose interest. And then Star Wars came out, and that really captured their attention. It's almost like the real space thing was replaced with the space fantasy of Star Wars, you know. And I got it. I understood. It was visually stunning. We'd never seen anything like it. I watched that film, and it motivated me in a different direction. While my friends were playing with the action figures, I wanted to understand the filmmaking process. I wanted to understand, how did they make the film? How did they create the technology to capture the visuals on those planets and spaceships and locations? It seemed believable. In addition to seeing Star Wars, you know, seeing 2001 as a child was another transcendent experience for me. You know, the realism of that film, the design work. I mean, here we are over 50 years later, and it still looks like it was made now. It was incredible from an aesthetic standpoint. If you look at a movie like Apollo 13, which again is a docudrama, it's not science fiction, but I wanted to tell stories that were similar to that, but set in the future. So you get the science right, you get the physics right. Superman the movie, which came along in 1978, that was a film that I still revisit. It's almost like watching 3 different movies in one. You have this Krypton movie, which is this sort of alien planet and world, which for me as a child, I had never seen anything like that. That vision actually blew Star Wars away. I thought it was so well done. Then you have Smallville, you know, where Superman was growing up as a kid, and it looked almost like a classic American painting or something, right? It was this beautiful Andrew Wyeth look. And then you had this third movie, which was this sort of crime caper that took place in like Metropolis, which was New York City, right? And those 3 films, they all have their individual look and feel, and they all come together in this one film. I was always just so taken by that journey. Another film at the time that impacted me was Close Encounters. There'd been movies about aliens as monsters and everything, but that film used music as a communication tool. I thought that was really, really neat. It was so cool. And the beauty of the spacecraft, the alien spacecraft, and all the lights and everything. You know, Douglas Trumbull, who worked on 2001, did the visual effects for that. And then another movie that's a big touch point for me, Blade Runner, he did the visual effects for that. Blade Runner is another one where it's the world is so well realized. Ridley Scott did such a tremendous job of bringing that vision of Los Angeles in the future to life. It was awe-inspiring, it was depressing, it was oppressive, I mean, there's so many things that it did. That was another one that really, really inspired me and motivated me to be a filmmaker. And I thought, maybe what I can do is grow up and use the technology from Star Wars to tell the stories about the kind of future that I thought I was going to grow up to experience.